got this guy, Hakeem Jeffries. Okay? And, he goes out there and he's like, we're going to do maximum warfare against Republicans, Florida Republicans. If you F around, you're going to find out all this stuff. And, what I said was, listen, and he's like, oh, if you do the redistricting, we're going to take out all your members, we're going to do all this stuff. And what I said was, go ahead, make my day. I don't think we're going to...
Welcome back. That was Governor Ron DeSantis on Friday doing an impersonation of what the highest-ranking African-American member of Congress sounds like. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, in the past, when the legislature has done congressional redistricting, they have held public hearings around the state, like they did after the 2010 census. Or they embarked on a lengthy legislative process, as they did in 2022. But this time, there was nothing deliberate about the process. 24 hours after the governor gave the legislature the map, they were voting on it in a committee. And the level of secrecy surrounding how this map was drawn was rather amazing. During the one hearing in the Senate, senators from both parties tried to find out who was involved in creating the map that gave Republicans 4 additional seats. Here's Republican Senator Jen Bradley questioning the governor's map maker, Jason Poreda.
Can you identify individuals that you were in consultation with through the map-making process? Any outside groups involved? Can you give us a sense of who you collaborated with in the rendition of this map?
So I'm the only map drawer. I'm the only one that moved any lines around on the map. I did work with other EOG staff and council, but I'll leave it at that.
EOG refers to the Executive Office of the Governor. And this was how Poreda responded when Senator Rosalynn Osgood asked the same question.
Any other internal conversations I had with the EOG staff or our council, I'm going to keep between us.
And this is what happened when Senator Lori Berman gave it a try.
Can you tell us who reviewed this map before it was published yesterday?
I'm going to leave that with the same answer I just gave.
I'm confused why you can't tell us who had the opportunity to review this map. What privilege or what reason is there for not telling us who reviewed this map?
I've been advised by council to just leave it at EOG staff and council that, and that's it.
One reason why the governor is being so secretive is he knows there will be a lawsuit, and he wants to make it as hard as possible for the group suing to get to the truth. Now, back in 2010, former Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber was the legal advisor for the Fair Districts Amendment and was part of the legal team that successfully sued the state in 2015 over redistricting. I spoke to him about what will likely happen next. First, what was your reaction to how the governor has handled this entire redistricting matter? And then let's talk about whether or not fair districts is now vulnerable.
Well, first of all, obviously the Constitution was not the organizing principle of the governor's maps. It was clearly his own hubris, because he just simply disregarded one of the more popular constitutional amendments in the last few decades. 62% of Florida voters said they wanted districts that were drawn fairly, compactly, and with those kinds of elements. And they did not want districts done precisely the way Governor DeSantis drew these districts. So this was not about the people of Florida. It was not about the Constitution of Florida. It was about Governor DeSantis and probably pleasing, Republican primary voters in 28.
Well, but let's go to the issue. Do you believe that these maps, as they are now drawn, as they have been approved by the legislature, do you see them as violating the Fair Districts Amendment?
Well, of course they violate the Fair Districts Amendments. The Fair Districts Amendments say you can't draw a map with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party or an incumbent. And I think they've actually admitted they were drawn with partisan intent. So clearly they violate the Fair District Amendments that the people of Florida wanted in their Constitution. That's not even a question.
Well, let me jump in. To be fair, the map maker, testified before the Senate Rules Committee that he used partisan data but denied that it was with partisan intent. That he said he did not draw these maps with partisan intent. He simply used partisan data. I don't know if it's a distinction without much of a difference, but go ahead.
Ridiculous, obviously. Florida, you can do an analysis with metrics that are inviolate scientific principles. And Florida's map currently is one of the most partisan drawn in the country. The new map is even more partisan. And every word from the president, from the governor, has been about getting more Republican seats. You know, I actually litigated these maps 10 years ago for the fair districts on a team of litigators, and we had the maps thrown out. We had to find emails and texts showing and sort of finding the intent. It's not even a question here. Obviously, we know what they wanted to do because they've said it. They've answered the president's call to do it. And now he's saying the amendments themselves that prohibit it are not even applicable. So obviously, this would not be a difficult case to make in any court, and it shouldn't be a difficult case to make in any court.
Well, except they are going to make it difficult to make, because one of the things that they've done is by not including any legislators. I think back when you did this lawsuit 10 years ago, you were able to question legislators, see emails, text messages, look at all of the material around it. They've done none of that. They've shared nothing with any legislator during this process. The map maker said he just spent the last 2 weeks creating the map. And when he was specifically asked, who in the governor's office assisted you? Who did you consult with? He refused to identify individuals who theoretically could now be deposed to get to that very issue of intent.
First of all, if you've sort of made the case as to why it's clearly partisan. If they had nothing to hide, why would they hide everything? If everything they said was just fine, why would they refuse to say anything? That argument's being made by them, and the best evidence is just to look at the maps themselves. They are bragging about getting rid of Democratic congressmen. Why would they use partisan data if they didn't want to affect a partisan outcome? So this is sort of a silly argument to say. So I think what the Florida Supreme Court should do is say, look, I understand all these questions are being raised by the governor. The legislature passed this. Let's give everybody a chance to do discovery. Let's have a trial. Let's do all that. But let's not deliver those maps into operation today for the midterms, because frankly, those maps have not gone through the kind of pressure testing that the other map went through when the Florida Supreme Court reviewed it and it was litigated. So I think the Florida Supreme Court should kick this can down the road, this horrible looking can down the road, let it be litigating, where I think ultimately plaintiffs will win and have these maps, these new maps thrown out. But to rely on these maps a couple months before the election is really a travesty.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, what the options are for the state Supreme Court. As you know, 6 of the 7 current justices on the state Supreme Court were appointed by Ron DeSantis. So there's a perception among many that this is a court that will do the governor's bidding, having been largely appointed by him. Do you subscribe to that theory? Do you believe that the justices of the Florida Supreme Court will honor their oaths, or do you think that they will favor their political benefactor in Ron DeSantis?
Listen, I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for a long time. I've litigated this issue before, and I think and hope that the court will do the right thing. I don't think any judge wants their legacy to be that they found that they issued an opinion that deprived Floridians out of what they wanted in their constitution. I'm hopeful, frankly. And, even though judges are picked politically, often the weight of their office allows them to do things that are proper and consistent with the law. And I hope that they do that.
Except I know what the argument is going to be by DeSantis and his counsel, which is the field of play is very different now, given the Calise decision that just came down from the U.S. Supreme Court that basically struck down another element of the Voting Rights Act that said that you cannot draw lines to benefit a particular race, which was something that was included in fair districts. It was just one of the prongs. And so, therefore, since the Louisiana map was struck down, Alabama, other states are redrawing, that they will argue that knowing this decision was coming and actually having it come in the midst of this debate, they would have been required to redraw their maps this year anyway.
That is absolutely untrue. The Supreme Court, as you're talking about, is the Calais decision. It's about federal law. It's about Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and it does not prevent states from providing greater protections to their citizens through state law. That's just clear. By the way, in that decision, the Supreme Court quoted Rucho v. Common Cause greatly. That case was a very well-known case a few years ago where they actually talked about the Fair District Amendments and said states can do that. Now, to your point that they're dealing with the minority and gerrymandered districts, the minority districts, that doesn't change the fact that the remaining provisions, assuming a court were to have a trouble with it, can't independently operate. There's no reason why the Supreme Court would say, aha, because 2 words out of the Fair District Amendments we think we may have trouble implementing doesn't change the rest of the amendment, which can independently operate, and which, by the way, was the centerpiece of the amendment when it passed. People voted for what was the most visible part of the amendment, which clearly was the prohibition against partisan and incumbent partisan gerrymandering and incumbency protection. And those remain, and they can be animated through the amendment precisely the way the people of Florida wanted them to.